Ahead of security talks, the Prime Minister has addressed the Papua New Guinea government. He's the first foreign government leader to do so. Liberal Senator Paul Scarr joins me now. Senator, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. You've spent some time negotiating with private and public sector stakeholders in Papua New Guinea and even spent some time volunteering in PNG. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese will become the first foreign head, or has become the first foreign head of government to address the PNG Parliament. In your view, how significant is this for relations between our two countries, and what did you make of the Prime Minister's speech to their Parliament?
Well, I think it's very significant, and as you say, I actually lived and worked in Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea for over 2 years between 1999 and 2001, and I acted for the private sector and the public sector, various government agencies during that time. So, like many Australians who've lived and worked in Papua New Guinea, I have a very, very deep bond with the people of Papua New Guinea, and I think it's a terrific thing that our Prime Minister had the opportunity to address the PNG Parliament. A wonderful thing, a great thing.
Excellent. And he spoke on a number of topics. One which the Coalition would probably be happy about, as he was spruiking the Australian working visas, trying to get PNG workers to come and work on our farms. But also, what did you make of his comments about having a PNG team in the NRL?
Well, when I gave my first speech to Parliament back in 2019, I actually, and I don't know if the PM read the speech, but I actually advocated for a PNG team to enter into the National Rugby League competition. If there's one thing amongst many that the people of PNG and the people of Australia share, it's a love of rugby league and a love of sport. And sport is such an important thing in terms of deepening the bond between respective peoples. I can remember being in Port Moresby during State of Origin time, and Port Moresby would absolutely go nuts. There would be these little buses called PMVs, which used to take people around Port Moresby. Some of them would be dressed in blue, some of them in maroon, and the place would just go nuts. It was a wonderful thing, and I think it'd be tremendous if there was a PNG team in the NRL. I think it'd be a great thing.
Watch this space. Let's talk about the Albanese government's signature climate change policy to reach a climate target of 43% reduction by 2030. It requires big emitters to cut greenhouse gases by almost 5% each year. From mid this year to that date, there will be a price on carbon and a market for companies to buy and sell permits off each other in the marketplace. $600 million initially from the government to help facilities transition to lower technologies. What are your thoughts on the policy?
Well, it causes me a great deal of concern. I represent the people of Queensland, and dozens and dozens of these large entities which are generating these emissions are actually based in my home state of Queensland. And Queensland did not vote for this policy at the last federal election, and it is mainly going to impact our regional communities. Bear in mind that the carbon price, which was introduced by ex-Prime Minister Julia Gillard, was at about $23 a tonne. And what they're proposing here, what the Albanese government is proposing here, is $75 a tonne, plus it's indexed to inflation each year, plus an additional 2% each year. So it's going to go up and up and up. And my main concern is that there are businesses making decisions today which are going to look at this policy and say, do I really have to have my business in Australia, or can I have it in an overseas country, produce the same amount of emissions, if not more, but in a country which doesn't have this policy?
Okay, fair enough. But business and industry groups have actually been relatively positive about it, saying that it's the certainty that they've needed. And haven't most big companies set an ambition to be carbon neutral themselves by 2050 anyway? They've just been waiting for clear climate change policy from the government to know where they stand, right?
Well, there's a big difference between 2050 and 2030. And as you mentioned, this policy provides for a decrease in what's referred to as baseline emissions of 4.9% a year up to 2030. We can't get ahead of the technology. If the technology is not there to help some of these major corporations make the transition in a cost-effective, sustainable way, then they'll have no choice but to shut their doors. So I just counsel caution. This is a very difficult and complex and costly policy. I was reading the consultation paper this week after it was released, and the bureaucratic maze that companies are going to have to navigate through in order to comply with these policies is absolutely extraordinary, and it deeply concerns me.
OK, I understand that it's very complex, but isn't it better to do something, even if it's not perfect, and tidy it up along the way instead of doing nothing at all? Like, isn't there going to be a review of the policy settings in 2026?
Well, just think about that. There's going to be a review of the policy settings in 2026. We're in 2023 now, so they're going to review the impact of the policy in 3 years' time. We might not have time to make the adjustments after those 3 years have passed. People are making decisions today about whether or not they're investing capital in plant and equipment in Australia, or whether or not they're going to invest it in another overseas jurisdiction. That's my concern. I think there's a lot of naivety in this policy that you can just put something tidily up and say, well, there are 215 emitters, large-scale industrial emitters in this country. We need to achieve this goal by 2030, so we'll just work out what we need to do and divide it across the 215. The real world doesn't work that way. The real world doesn't work that way. There are some companies that have been operating on the basis of technology that have been in place for decades. There are newer companies. Some companies will find it easier to transition than other companies. There's a lot of complexity and difficulty in this policy, and I just don't think the government gets it.
Senator, great to chat with you. I hope to do it again sometime.
Love to, and I look forward to cheering on the Hunters when they make the NRL competition.
Let's look out for it. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you again soon, hopefully.